Hello, everybody, and welcome to our fourth installment of the Discovering Pathways series. And so, this is our second episode of our career readiness videos. And so, in our career readiness videos, we're featuring Native professionals who work in various career fields or directly with the Native community. And I think it's good to have these or show off these different professionals because we often don't see them, or we often see them in working in the field, but we don't really get to hear their stories or their journeys. And so that's why we really wanted to insert this portion of the career readiness into our Discovering Pathways series. And so don't forget, next week we will be highlighting Haskell Indian Nations University, and we'll be having one current student and one former student at the university. So mark your calendars for Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And so before we get into anything, I would like to introduce everybody today. And so to introduce myself and my co-panelists, my name is Avery Wyatt. And so I've been working with Annie for about 2 months now. And so we created this project to give students still that recognition and to give them exposure to colleges, universities, and also different careers paths that they can possibly choose. And so with COVID, we wanted them to still have that engagement that they would normally have without being quarantined. So that's why we wanted to install this virtual platform for students so they're able to see careers, students, hear from students, professionals, and stuff like that. And so, Ferdina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon or good evening to everyone out there. We're excited to offer this. I think Avery did a great job introducing the program. My name is Ferdina Joy Romero, and I'm with the Nevada Department of Education, where the Native Youth Community Project lives. And so we're really excited to bring this to you. I am a Southern Paiute from the Kaiba Band of Paiutes and also from the Mwapa Band of Paiutes. So we're really excited to have Savannah tonight. So back to you, Avery.
Cool. Thank you, Ferdina. And so now to introduce our special guest for this evening, we have Savannah Romero. So Savannah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Savannah Romero. I'm Eastern Shoshone of the Wind River Reservation. I'm currently working as the manager of partnerships and programs for Illuminative, and I am so honored to be here today and get to share my story with you all, answer any questions that you have, and just talk about my journey.
Cool. Thank you for being here with us today. Especially thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to be here with us. And so I know a lot of people out there, everyone sort of knows about Illuminatives, but I mean, we see what's on social media. I always see a post here and there, people sharing it. But describe what Illuminatives is about and describe more about the organization.
Yeah, of course. So Illuminatives is a racial justice organization at its core, and it's really focused on building power for Native communities by amplifying Native stories, voices, supporting Native artists, and really just changing the narrative about Native people, and having a focus on contemporary Native stories. Right. It was really birthed from this kind of history-making report called Reclaiming Native Truth, which was the largest public opinion research study ever conducted about Native people. And what that report found was that Native people are largely invisible across the conversations in the U.S. And that's something that we kind of knew, right, already. But as for having the data to be able to take that to decision makers and policymakers and people in influential positions, to be able to say, hey, like this is an issue, and invisibility and systemic erasure is the modern day form of racism against Native people. And it creates pervasive issues, right? I think some of the other research that Reclaiming Native Truth found was that 27 states in the U.S. K through 12 education standards make no mention of a single Native person. That's something that absolutely affects our children, our youth, right? And 87% of K through 12 curriculum standards across the U.S. don't mention a single Native person after the 1900s, right? So when we are mentioned, it's often that our people are mentions of Native people are relegated to the past, and there's no mention or discussion of contemporary Native people and the ways in which Native people are contributing meaningfully to society today, the ways that are, we're living in our communities, and we are, like just the beauty of us here right now, right? And so Illuminative really works to undo all of those toxic misconceptions and stereotypes through influencing pop culture and mainstream media and K through 12 education.
Yeah, that sounds really amazing. I mean, I know a lot of Native organizations out there today are sort of fighting. We're all sort of fighting the same thing, but in different ways. And I think that's what's really cool. And I feel like Illuminatives is doing its own little thing too. And I think that's really cool that what you're doing.
Yeah, I was fortunate to be on a committee with you to oversee the Indian Education for All initiative. Can you talk about that as well?
Yeah, so like I said, the Reclaiming Native Truth report found that 87% of state history standards don't mention Native Americans after the 1900s, and 27 states make not a single mention of a Native American in K through 12 curriculum. I know that, speaking from my own personal experience, growing up in the K through 12 public education system, I never felt like Native people were accurately represented. And I grew up in a Black and brown neighborhood. I grew up in one of the most diverse school districts in the country. And I was still one of the only Native students in school, and was, just like never felt like Native issues were ever being discussed or talked about. And that's really problematic, right? When Native history is American history, it is U.S. history, and the fact that we don't get to learn about Native people, the effects of colonization, the way that has manifested in our communities, and contemporary Native people and communities that exist around us today, like that leads to violence and racism and discrimination for our children and our people. And we should have representation, right? Like, as the first peoples of this country, everybody should know about true history, right? And it's just not currently being taught. So Native Education for All initiative through Illuminative is really working to try and get mandated K through 12 Native education curriculum. So the way that education in the US works is that it's really determined on a state-by-state basis. And in some states, it's determined by a school board basis, like a local, even more local basis, which means that all of the standards for what has to be taught or included in curriculum is determined by a bunch of different things. There's no standard across the board, right? So what we've seen is some states, like for instance, Washington State has implemented a mandatory K through 12 Native education curriculum that was developed in partnerships with tribes in Washington State. And what that means, and the curriculum is called Since Time Immemorial. And what that means is that now every single child going through the K through 12 education system is exposed and learns about the tribes in Washington State and the history, right? And like what those communities are working on today. And so Native Education for All, what we say in, I guess it's like a business term, a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. The goal of that program is to ensure that there's Native mandated curriculum across all 50 states. But as it stands right now, it's only a few states that are in that process of implementing that requirement. So through the Native Education for All program, we're really trying to work with local communities and organizations on the ground in the grassroots level, that really know their community well and the needs of their community to try to eventually push for this kind of policy. It's gotten a little sidelined, right, because of the pandemic. There's so much going on in the K in the education space right now, more salient concerns. So, but it's definitely something that we are still very much focused on.
Right. And I know you guys also did a lot of work on the mascot issue. And that was really enlightening to see, you know, one of your, I don't remember if it's your director on the news channels. And so that was good to see that it was being, you know, it's opening the doors for a lot of things. The conversations are happening now.
Right. And I think it goes back to what I touched on before, is that representation and true and accurate representation matters, right? Bringing it back to the research of Reclaiming Native Truth, 72% of Americans said that they almost never encounter or seek information about Native people, right? Again, when they do, it's in the form of a racist mascot, right? Or it's like a pan-Indian identity of a person who, you know, was supposed to exist a couple hundred years ago. And so the reason why mascots is part of the issues that we tackle at Illuminative is because we know that representation matters, and we know that that relegating Native people to the past and presenting them, presenting our communities in this, like, in a way that perpetuates toxic stereotypes is harmful for our children, right? The research tells us, particularly the research by Dr. Stephanie Freiberg, that when Native youth see Native mascots, it has negative psychological, cultural, social effects on them and their mental health, and it even increases suicidal ideation. It's literally hurting our children. And for non-Native children, it you know, there's the research points to a potential increase in racist tendencies and racism. So it's just all around not beneficial to anyone. And it's 2020. We deserve better representation as Native people.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, we definitely, all those things are very important. And I understand too, there was Illuminatives was doing one more project. It was the Indigenous Future Survey, right? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the Indigenous Future Survey is such an incredibly exciting program project. Yeah. The survey is the really the cornerstone to a larger project called the Indigenous Futures Project. But the Indigenous Futures Survey was it went live, I think, mid-June, and it just closed a couple of weekends ago on Saturday. But the goal with it was to, for the first time, ask Native people what mattered to them. And that's never been done before, right? Native people have never been asked about what matters to them and the visions that they have for the future. And so we set out at a goal of getting 2,000 respondents across the country. You know, we wanted, of course, diverse representation regionally, and from people of all ages and gender identities and, you know, places of living, whether you're living in a suburb or on a reservation or in an urban area. And we actually got over 6,000 responses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's very exciting because what we'll be able to do with this data is we're going to be able to give it to people and say, like, this is what Native people said that they want. This is what Native people said is important to them. We also asked questions about the effects of COVID-19, right? And we know that the CDC just released that report that really outlined the detrimental and disproportionate effects that COVID-19 has had in Native communities. But before that, we didn't really have that data, right? To use as a tool. So the Indigenous Future Survey asks about COVID-19. It also asks about trust in institutions. You know, how do you trust the K-12 education system? Do you trust police? Do you trust the federal government to make good decisions about Native communities? You know, and it asks questions on perceived racism and discrimination. And then also, what are the issues that are most important to you, and what issues have had the largest effect on your life. So I can't tell you what the data says yet, but we will be coming out with the preliminary results in the next few weeks. So definitely look out for that.
That's exciting. I remember talking with you when we were interviewing you for this section, and you talked about how you interviewed your grandpa, and he took him on a different path. And I did the same thing with my parents. I called them and I said, here's, can you answer these questions for me? And it was interesting to see where my dad fit in all of that. And it was really it wasn't the Indigenous person that we are today, but it was more of the old school Indian guy answering these questions. So it was really cool to hear his perspective as well as my mom's. So
yeah, definitely. I think I had a similar experience with my grandfather, who, he grew up in a different time, and he grew up with different access than I had, and he sees things differently than me in some ways, and that's okay. And I think that it was a really awesome opportunity for me to just listen, right? Because every single question that he answered turned into a story. So of course, it took like a couple hours to complete with him, but it was a really cool experience, and it'll be definitely something that I remember for the rest of my life. And if anybody is super sad that they missed out on this opportunity, don't worry. We will have another. We're trying to make it a yearly thing, so it's annual. So next year we hope to gather even more responses, and then the year after that, even more responses after that. So look out for next summer Indigenous Future Survey. Definitely take it. Call up your aunties, call up your uncles, get them.
Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, I saw people sharing the survey who normally are just kind of like don't share anything besides like native memes. So I thought that was really cool. And I think hopefully in the future, I think our native presence will get even stronger on social media, especially on Facebook and Twitter. And hopefully we just get as thousands of responses, maybe 20,000, who knows? And that could really tell our story of what's sort of hidden behind or what isn't really asked to us. I mean, we need people to hear our stories. And I think that survey is really important.
Right.
And so, Savannah, I know you've had a huge path to your professional career. So would you mind explaining to us that path towards, or how did you get to Illuminatives? What was the path towards that career?
Yeah, it was one that took many turns, very, Zig Zaggy. I'll just start from kind of the beginning. So I grew up I was born in Seattle. I mostly grew up in Seattle and in Alaska growing up. And I actually grew up in the foster care system. So I was taken away when I was 2 months old initially, and kind of bounced back and forth between living with my mom and living with foster homes and other family, like distant family members, until I was about 11. And, that was difficult, of course. And now understanding as I've gotten older, and I understand kind of like the systems that are at play there, right? The history of child removal that exists in our communities. We know that Native children disproportionately are disproportionately overrepresented in the foster care system still, despite how small our population is compared to, other races. And so anyway, when I was 11 years old, I made a decision to live with my grandmother, who is amazing and incredible and is just the, most important person in my life. But she, I think by that time, I had already been taking care of myself, for a really long time, and just kind of like figuring out how to navigate the world. I also want to say, I think before, to backtrack a little bit, it's really important to root my story in the generations that have come before me, right? I think my biological grandmother was, and my mom was taken from my biological grandmother from the reservation, which is how she ended up in Seattle. So again, that theme of like child removal, going back to the boarding school era is very prominent and a big part of my life and my story, as it is with so many other people. But yeah, just to say that there. Anyway, I lived with my grandmother until I turned 18. I'd always wanted to go to college, but nobody in my family had ever gone to college. I really had no idea what I was doing or how to do it, how to apply or how to pay for it. You know, I very much grew up really, really poor. Didn't have a lot of resources. Grew up in, like I said, a predominantly Black and Brown community that was very underfunded because we didn't have good test scores, right? And so thankfully through sports and having like coaches and people at school, teachers that really believed in me, and programs to help us like figure out how to navigate applying for college. One in particular was called the Dream Project at the University of Washington, and college students would come into the high schools and work with us on like how to fill out our college applications, and that whole process. And it was so just like life-changing, right? Because I had no idea how to fill out a FAFSA or how to write a personal statement the way that the colleges want to see it. And, so it was truly like me leaning heavily on mentors and like older kind of like brothers and sisters type people who had gone to college or had figured it out, and really just like asking for help all the time. If it wasn't for those people, like I wouldn't have been able to figure it out, or really to like, I think like also seeing people who look like me in college and seeing them do it and me feeling like, oh, if they can do it, I can do it, right? Really helped steward that along as well. So I went to the University of Washington. I started school wanting to be a marine biologist because I had volunteered at the Seattle Aquarium and went to SeaWorld one time and loved it. And then I got to college and I was like, wow, I'm really bad at chemistry. This is not going to work out. And I shifted to kind of, wanting to help people. And so I ended up majoring in social work, which I then never practiced. Because that's what happens sometimes, is that you major in something and then you actually never do that thing, and that's okay. But I knew that by the time that I was about to graduate from college, I knew that I wanted to work kind of like at a macro level. What we say in social work, there's like micro practice, which is direct one-on-one, and then there is meso, which is community, and then macro, which is more policy. And so I knew that I wanted to work on a policy level, but to be honest, I had no idea what that even meant. Like even the word policy was so foreign to me and abstract. I just didn't even understand like what it actually meant. But again, because of another mentor who was Native, and he saw some internship opportunity and he forwarded it to me, working for a member of Congress as an intern in their district office. And so I applied and, I got the internship. I had no idea really what I was doing. But I ended up working there all of my senior year. I worked for Congressman Adam Smith in Seattle. And I loved it. I mean, it was such a cool opportunity. I had no idea that you could like call your member of Congress and get help with like visas, or that you could call them and like that there was all these things that they were supposed to be doing for you. I had those weren't the kinds of conversations that were being had around the dinner table, right? Like that was the kind of information that was accessible to me or common in like my communities and even in my friends' houses. So that led me to, you know, and I always wanted to work for Indian country. I always wanted to work for community. And I knew that anything that I did, it was going to be, I wanted to be dedicated to just like for the betterment of our people, right? And everyone kept telling me, if you want to work in Indian country and policy, you have to go to DC. And I was like, oh, I don't really want to go. It's like, I've never been to the East Coast and I'd never lived anywhere besides Seattle and Alaska. And I was like, I don't know, I'm a West Coast girl, like the East Coast.
Yeah.
Me. But everyone, you know, I just heard it so many times and I was like, okay, so I'll try it out. I'll apply for an internship. So I applied for an internship right when I graduated from college in Congressman Smith's DC office. It was just a 4-month internship. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I graduated. I thought I wanted to go to law school. I thought maybe I was waiting tables, right? Like I worked like 3 jobs, three jobs and went to school full time my whole time throughout college. I was and one of those was a waitress. I was a waitress and it's like, I'll just come back and wait some tables for a little while and study for the GRE and maybe go to grad school, maybe go to law school, who knows. And I went to DC and 3 weeks into my internship, they offered me a position.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, so I started there. And then I ended up working there for 3 years. Crazy. And it was such a strange experience. I mean, not only being on the East Coast as a West Coast girl, you know, but also walking the halls of Congress and like going and sitting on the House floor, you know, and I was like 22, 23 and just being among these like legislators and policymakers that we seem so like far away and distant and untouchable and smart, you know, and some of them aren't, like, you know, like some of them are like actually I think that it really I really shattered a lot of illusions that I had because I think that I definitely dealt with imposter syndrome, right? Like I still deal with imposter syndrome and thinking like I'm not smart enough or good enough or whatever to occupy certain spaces. But the more that I've learned and the more people that I've met and the more rooms that I've been in with these like influential decision makers or, you know, whatever it is, the more that I realize like these people are just like us. And some of them, like we think they had to do all of these things to get there. And some of them didn't, and they're like not that smart, right? I think anyone listening to this call is like probably way smarter and like has way better like lived experiences than most of the members of Congress and would do probably a way better job. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. But
no, you're good.
So that was really exciting to be I don't remember what room we were in, but you were like, yeah, we go this way, and you're taking us through all the back ways.
Yeah,
that was really fun.
So I actually I served with Dina for the National Indian Education Association. Well, I guess before that I worked there. So anyway, I worked on the Hill for 3 years, and then I worked for the National Indian Education Association, and that's where I met Dina for the first time. And I think I started right when NIA had their Hill Advocacy Week, where all the members and all the board members fly to DC and they do a week of advocacy. We call it a fly-in. And you basically just go meet with a bunch of members and advocate for, you know, whatever your stances and your positions. And I just starting at NIA because I knew the halls of Congress so intimately and all of the back roads and, you know, just how to navigate everything. I escorted and I staffed a lot of meetings, and I think I was like week 2. I was super new, but yeah, I mean, it was an incredible experience to like be able to occupy that space, and to know and to learn, that I could be there too. And yeah, it was very, very interesting. I still feel like I'm learning from that experience, and I think it's offered me a really great perspective to think about issues and think about our country in a very critical way. But yeah, so I worked at NIA, and then I applied to graduate school finally, and I ended up going to NYU for my master's in public policy. So I moved to New York City, which I, again, never thought I would ever be in New York City. But I did that, and I just graduated in May, before joining the team. It was interesting to graduate in a pandemic. My heart goes out to all of the high schoolers who that was their first graduation. It was something I was thinking about a lot during that time. But yeah, I also worked as a consultant for a year for a nonprofit governance consultant while I was in grad school. Super random. Anyway, the point of my story is that you never know what paths life is going to present you. And I think I was telling Avery this earlier. I think we have so much pressure. There's so much pressure put on young people to decide what they're going to do when they are in kindergarten, right? Or to like know what they're going to do when they're applying for college, and to have a path and to have a goal and set out on that. But the fact is that you're probably going to change your mind multiple times, and like the path of your life is going to change, and it's okay. Like, it's okay to not know what you want to do when you're 18. It's also okay to not know what you want to do when you're 30 or when you're 50, right? Like, you get to choose and you get to change your mind. And so I think like just rejecting that pressure that society puts on us to like try and figure out all those things out will allow people to just like have the space to be and to like do what makes them happy, and not waste the energy of trying to like figure out the future, control it, because the fact is that you can't control it. And yeah, that's all.
Yeah, but your journey sounds, like you said, it's a wide range of paths going like all kinds of different ways. But yeah, I mean, none of us are on any certain path that we have to take. The road isn't built for us. I mean, we're there to pave our road as we go. So, and I think you've shown that, especially with your road and your story. I mean, I'm amazed just sitting here listening. I'm like, whoa, she's been to like all these places. But yeah, it sounded like, well, from the start in high school, you mentioned how you had that support with the, what was it, the Dream program you said, or something like that?
The Dream Project, yeah.
The Dream Project, yeah, that would be a really good program for anybody listening out there to implement, maybe involving college students with high school students who are maybe interested in college or just looking for some type of post-secondary education. I think that's really good for Native students, just to see students in that field, or even students just going to school. Because I remember, I think when I was in high school, my mom was actually going to college, and I think that's when I knew I could probably do it, because I remember I was doing her math homework. No. And I was like, oh, I think I can do this. But at the same time, I didn't know anybody else who was in college. But yet again, I had a mentor who sort of reached out to me my senior year, and she reached out to me through my mom. And so I think these mentors who do reach out to college students, even though they may not get that feedback right away, those students still remember them. They remember their faces. They remember just like, oh, hey, I remember that person was doing this in college. And I think that's a really good thing, just to have that exposure with the students.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, so definitely having those programs. There was also the University of Washington. I mean, I'll like hype University of Washington all day, because they really, I mean, they've done a lot to create space for Native students on campus. They built a longhouse on campus, actually, the Wechlabalt, And I was the first class to be able to graduate in it. And it's this beautiful, huge, long house that was a result of student advocacy for over a decade of student advocacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
They also have the Office of Minority Affairs and Diversity. I think it's called something different now, but what they do is they have specific recruiters for to go into high schools with large Native student populations, and the recruiters or the ambassadors are Native college students, and they I was an ambassador the 4 years that I was in that I was at UW. So we would go to schools like on the reservation and or like nearby, and we would just talk to Native students about our experience and what it was like to be in college and to be Native and to like find community and how do we like fill our soul and our spirit in this like sometimes predominantly white spaces, right? But also this is how you fill out a college application and like helping students with all of those things. And we would also bring Native students to campus, and they would get to stay for, I think, either a week or a weekend.
Oh, cool.
Just like stay in the dorms and be on campus and do workshops, like college readiness workshops and like application stuff, right? So that was really, really great. And I think exactly what you're saying, Avery, about I saw Diana Canoyer's.
Oh, you're good.
Diana, she's one of my favorite people of all time. She is one of my mentors also. So I'm so excited that she's watching because yeah, she's like very special to me. But I remember the first time I saw this woman, her name Marjorie Thompson, and she's Tulalip, and also school's really expensive and I had no money, and so I just applied to every scholarship I possibly could, and ended up getting college paid for, which was amazing. I had this one scholarship, and I gave a speech for it or whatever, and she was there also talking, and she had just graduated from Harvard Law School, and I just remember I'd never met a lawyer, and I'd never met anyone who even went to Harvard. It was such a so starry-eyed, and we just chatted and we talked, and she offered to take me out for coffee, and it was really like the first time I was ever able to imagine myself as maybe going to law school, right? Because I saw someone who looked like me do it. And we like went out to coffee a few times, and sometimes I run into her and we're like friends on Instagram. But I say that story because I don't know if she knows how much she impacted my life, but she really did. And I don't know. I just think that like if there's ever anything that I can do to like help anyone else that's younger than me, or like be that person to take somebody else out to coffee, or like give them advice, or read their personal statement, or whatever it is, I just think that I would love and welcome always the opportunity to reciprocate the kindness, right? And like just the way people poured into me when I was that age. So
yeah, we just never know that one little time that you showed kindness or love, and how that could like lift somebody up. And we don't ever know what our actions can actually be. And I think you're even, we look to you even now. I mean, I'm way older than you, of course. But, I even look to you like, wow, look at all the great things that this young woman is doing. Not to put too much pressure on you, but to know that you're paving a path for these young people who are coming behind you. And you're empowering them to be like, look at your story. You were a foster child, and you have risen to who you are. You talk so eloquently and with such passion about what you do, and you're definitely on your path. So it's awesome and amazing to see what just one little tiny tweak of just being kind can do to someone like yourself, and carry you, and to know how many scholarships you got. I wish I was smart enough to do stuff like that. You know, I well, yeah, I paid some money back. So
yeah, it's so funny that you say that, because and thank you, I appreciate that. You know, I love you so much. I'm so excited. The funny thing is like, I'm so excited for the people younger than me. Like, I am pumped for the generation that is like coming up right now, because I think that like people who are in high school right now are just starting, you know, just like stepping into their adulthood. They have access to so much more. They have so many more resources with social media to understand, right, like the effects of colonization, to understand like all of the like systems of oppression. I think growing up, I really struggled to understand why I saw the kinds of, you know, the suffering in my community and in my family, and like not to ever only use a deficit perspective, right? Because I think that our communities are full and rich and beautiful and powerful. But I saw, right, like my mom struggled with drug addiction, and her parents struggled with addiction, right? And I didn't understand why until I got to college, and I was lucky enough to take American Indian Studies classes, right? I minored in American Indian Studies. And then for the first time, I learned all of the intentional systems that have happened over time, all of the attacks against our people that have manifested in the hurt in our communities now, right? And I think it took me until college to be able to learn that. You have to learn that stuff first before you can mobilize to resist and to heal, right? And to say like, this stops with me, like this cycle ends with me. And
we're here.
Yeah. I saw this thing on Instagram yesterday about never underestimate a cycle breaker, right? Because everything that person had to wade through and navigate to break a cycle, there's nothing harder than that, right? Like, to break cycles of generational trauma and hurt that's been inflicted upon our communities intentionally, systemically. But younger people now, because of social media, they have access to that information earlier. And I just see like the conversations that are being had about decolonization and, you know, settler colonialism, and just seeing like young people use that terminology way before I ever knew what it was, right?
Same here. Yeah.
I'm so excited for like the work that they're gonna do, and like just the way, like how, like the power that they're gonna bring, and the healing and the medicine that they're gonna bring for our communities, because yeah, I mean, it's just really exciting. So yeah, I'm so excited for everyone.
Our future. That's a really funny thing that you say too, because I never really thought about that. I mean, I didn't learn much anything about colonialism, decolonization until maybe 3-4 years ago, until like my sophomore year, junior year of college.
Yeah. And
even then I was still fully grasping that subject. But you have youth nowadays like posting like decolonizing memes and stuff like that. You see people posting about it on Instagram. So I think that's really cool that our youth are already being empowered. And I think that has to do with a lot of us too, that role that we play. They see what we post, they see what we say, and they also do the same. And I think they're doing the same even more. So I think as we keep growing, our youth are going to become more knowledgeable even at a younger age. And I think that would be really cool to see in the future.
Right.
And so from I've heard your whole journey so far. It sounds really amazing. But so if there was one thing that you learned the most from all of your internships, jobs, what would that be?
Yeah, I think I think it kind of goes back to what I touched on earlier of that it's okay to change your mind. I think particularly my generation, as a millennial, I think
Yeah.
we're very much caught between generations, and that like the parents of our generation very much went into one career or sector and kind of stayed there for, they like got out of college or high school or whatever, and they worked their way up, and they retired, and they stayed with that position or that job until they retired. And I just think that that's just not really the way that my generation has done things, right? I think like the average time that a person has stays in like one position is like 2 or 3 years or something before kind of moving on to something else. We're all going to have like super scattered 401ks, and like if you don't know what that means, it's totally fine, because I really didn't either. But I think we're, my generation is really trying to figure out, like, we were taught this whole our whole growing up, like as kids, we were always told this narrative about getting one job and sticking to it, and getting a solid job, and so you can support your family and retire, and I just true. And I just see people are just moving around more and jumping across sectors, and like changing their minds, and like doing one thing and then doing another thing, and so I think that I don't know, I think it's okay, right? Like I've had a lot of jobs. I used to sell fireworks too, and like also was a waitress for super long, and like I've had lots of like really weird jobs, and I think I don't know, I think, like I said before, just stepping away from the pressure that you have to have it figured out, and just like have as many experiences as you can, and like figure out what you want to do, right? Like you should go try and intern in this place, and if you don't like it, then you don't like it. Go do something completely different, and like take on another opportunity, and like try a bunch of things until you figure out like what makes you happy and what feeds your soul, and what gives you life. Because we spend so much time working that that you gotta, like you should love what you do, and it's okay if it takes you a while to figure that out.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I mean, I wish I would have did that a little bit more, but I'm aiming for that retirement.
That's your next goal.
That's my goal.
Yeah, that's really good advice too to hear. And I was just thinking as you were saying this and just hearing your story. So if say there's somebody out there who's a foster Native youth listening to this, so what would be your best advice for that student who's going through the process right now?
Yeah, I would say lean on the people around you. You're not alone in your journey. There are people out there that are rooting for you, right? Like us three right here on this call are rooting for you. There are people out there that want to help you, that want to see you succeed, and are willing to walk with you through that process and help you navigate those spaces. And like I think I learned from for me growing up, I learned from a young age to like be resourceful, and to lean on the other people around me. And I know that like that's a really hard thing to do. It's really hard to ask for help, and it's really hard when you also feel isolated, right? Because I mean, don't get me wrong, like there were many times growing up I didn't have siblings, right? So I was like very much like going through this process alone, and I felt very isolated, and I had so many feelings about like I just wish there was one person who could understand me, and I found those people eventually, and a lot of it was through like college or kind of programs, or relying on resources that were offered, and even if your school doesn't offer resources, like there are resources out there, and there are people out there that are in your corner, you know, like reach out to me, slide into my DMs on Instagram. Like I'll be happy to help you with your personal statement or whatever it is. But I think, you know, like we can't do it alone. And as Indigenous people, as Native people, like it is about the collective. It is about community, right? It's about like raising all boats together, and making sure that like we're all good, right? Like, right. And like that's where our power is. And like that's where the healing comes from, is when we're like working together to support each other and like building bridges for each other and like helping each other up. And so like lean into that, right? Like just there are people that want to help you and like want to see you succeed. And I mean, like if I can do it, you can do it, honestly. There's like nothing like super special about me, right? Like it's just it's really about like relying on the people around you. Yeah, I don't know.
And yeah, we talked about this last time too. It's funny how you mentioned DMs, because I think with Jarrett on Tuesday, we were like, hey, I mean, don't be afraid to slide the DMs, like ask people questions. Because honestly, we love people like me, you, Ferdina. We love just like hearing from students. People, I mean, when we interact with students in the field, it's normal for them to ask us questions, but when it's at random, it's like, oh, we're always willing to help all students out there at all times of the day. I will answer a DM at midnight. I don't know about after midnight. I'll probably be asleep, but yeah, but we're always there to help all these students. And I think what I've heard from you so far is that we have to network. We can't be afraid to sort of like stay in this box that maybe we might be in. Like myself, like I grew up a very shy person, and it did take a long time just for me to sort of step out of that box. But what I've always told people is that once you do, it's the most amazing feeling, and it feels like such a weight is lifted off of you.
Yeah, and I think you know, I've been doing a lot of work around really trying to understand the way that my community organized itself, you know, in more of a traditional way. And everybody had a place, right? Like everybody had a role, everybody had like a gift and something to give. And just because that doesn't fit into like the box of society, or maybe it doesn't like easily mesh with like what is conventionally seen as successful or profitable or whatever, right? Like you have a space, you have a gift, and you have a role to fill and like something to contribute. Everyone does, right? And so I just think just like finding, like I said, finding what makes you happy, what fills you up, what gives you life, and like, you know, nourishes your soul, and going with that, and really trying to combat imposter syndrome, because I think that's a huge thing that holds so many of us back. I know for me, it's very much been a constant struggle, and like I said, like something I still struggle with, right? Of like occupying spaces that don't feel like they're meant for me. But like, I don't know, just you have to step into that power, right? Like you deserve to be in any space that you want to occupy, and you deserve to be heard and listened to and cared for and invested in, yeah. And so, yep, I feel like I'm answering. Yeah. I'm ending all of my answers with, yep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because it almost appears like, you know, a lot of times our children have low self-esteem issues and shy, you know, they're shy. But I hear you guys just saying, just break out of that and do something awesome and be amazing. Whatever it is, it doesn't mean that you're going to be a Savannah Romero or Avery Wyatt. You're your own person. And I like that message. That's a good message.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Savannah, thank you so much. I mean, I've even benefited from your advice just hearing you right now. I think I benefit from all of our panelists that we bring in. I always hear something new. And like what Ferdinand just said, actually, too, is that, I mean, don't try to be anybody else. Everyone who's been on here has a different story. And it's the same for everybody out there. None of us are going to grow up on the same path. Everyone's going to have to pave their own path in a way, and there's no path already set for them. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces of advice that we've taken from tonight. And yeah, thank you so much for being here with us, Savannah.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such an honor. Seriously, anyone out there who is watching, you can slide into my DMs. My Instagram handle is Savannah Romero, just my first and last name. I'm happy to like chat and be helpful in any way that I can. So.
Cool. Yeah. Right, thank you.
I'll encourage our students from Yerington and Walker River Paiute Tribe and the Fort McDermott Shoshone or Paiute Shoshone Tribe to send Savannah a message. I challenge you.
Yeah. You can get like hundreds.
It's good. Go ahead. I gotta reciprocate, you know? Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you for being here with us tonight, Savannah. We're very thankful for you, and we love the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so well, Ferdinand, we had another great show with Savannah Romero. We look forward to what's going to happen next week when we bring in students from Haskell Indian Nations University. We have an alumni here. Ferdinand, my parents are partial alumni in a way. Yeah. But,
they went. Yeah. They were there.
Yeah. Yeah, but we're very excited to bring in students from Haskell next week and a former student. And look forward to seeing everyone on Thursday next week.
All right. Until then, everybody have a peaceful night and love and enjoy one another.
Well, good night, everybody.
Good night.